I opened my eyes in a sterile hospital bed, staring at a signed divorce mandate. I hadn't just survived a coma. I'd woken up as Oliver, the universally despised Omega husband of the ruthless Alpha King, Nathaniel. With my public ruin scheduled for tomorrow, I had one choice: disappear completely. The scent of rubbing alcohol and expensive lilies was the first thing that hit me. I blinked against the harsh fluorescent lights of the Mount Sinai private wing in Manhattan. My head throbbed, a dull, rhythmic ache that echoed the steady beep of the heart monitor. As the fog in my brain cleared, a flood of memories that weren't mine crashed into my consciousness. I was Oliver, but I wasn't the Oliver I used to be, a pragmatic, hard-working accountant from Chicago. I had somehow transmigrated into the body of Oliver Harrington, the Omega husband of Nathaniel, the Alpha King of the Eastern Seaboard's financial empire and a literal modern monarch. According to the memories seeping into my mind, the original Oliver had been a tragic figure, desperately in love, pathetically clinging, and universally loathed. He had been manipulated into an arranged marriage to stabilize Nathaniel's corporate sovereignty. Nathaniel hated him. The public despised him. But worst of all was Tristan. Tristan was a fellow Omega, a rising star in the socio-political sphere, and Nathaniel's true love. Just 2 days ago, Tristan had orchestrated a masterful setup. He had deliberately thrown himself down the grand staircase of the royal penthouse at the plaza, making sure to tearfully accuse Oliver of pushing him out of jealous rage. Nathaniel hadn't even let Oliver speak. The Alpha's suffocating, dominant winter pine pheromones had crushed Oliver to his knees before Nathaniel coldly ordered his security to lock him away. The original Oliver, heartbroken and overwhelmed by his mate's rejection, had suffered a stress-induced cardiac event and slipped into a coma. And now, I was here. I turned my head. Resting on the mahogany nightstand was a crisp, thick document bearing the seal of the crown. Decree of dissolution. Next to it was a golden pen. Nathaniel was planning to announce the divorce tomorrow at the annual Sovereign Gala, effectively throwing me to the wolves, stripping me of my assets, and letting the press tear me apart for attempted murder. I didn't cry. I didn't feel the suffocating despair the original Oliver would have felt. I felt cold, calculated survival instinct. If he wants to throw me away, I'll take out the trash myself, I muttered, my voice raspy. I ripped the IV from the back of my hand, wincing as a bead of blood welled up. I didn't have much time. Nathaniel was likely at his corporate headquarters on Wall Street, finalizing the acquisition of a rival firm, utterly unconcerned about the Omega he had left to rot in a hospital bed. I grabbed the encrypted iPhone 15 Pro resting on the table. Fortunately, muscle memory provided the passcode. I immediately opened the secure banking app. The original Oliver might have been a fool in love, but he came from old money. His grandfather had left him a private trust fund routed through a shell company in the Cayman Islands, completely untethered from the royal treasury. I initiated an immediate wire transfer of $8 million to an offshore Barclays account. I knew Nathaniel's forensic accountants wouldn't think to look for right away. Next, I opened my contacts and found the only person the original Oliver had trusted: Sebastian. Sebastian was a beta, a razor-sharp defense attorney based out of Brooklyn, who had repeatedly warned Oliver about Tristan's manipulative nature. I typed out a rapid encrypted message via Signal. Seb, it's me. I'm awake, and I'm done. I need a black car at the service entrance of Mount Sinai in 20 minutes. Untraceable. Bring a burner phone and a set of scent blockers. The reply came 3 minutes later. Finally came to your senses. I'm on my way. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed. My body was weak, my vanilla and white tea pheromones souring with physical stress, but adrenaline pushed me forward. I stripped off the silk hospital gown and pulled on the clothes left in the small closet, a discreet black cashmere turtleneck and dark slacks. Before I left, I walked over to the nightstand. I picked up the heavy gold pen. I did leave a tear-stained letter begging for forgiveness or declaring my innocence. I simply flipped to the last page of the divorce mandate, signed Oliver Harrington in bold, steady strokes, and left it sitting squarely in the middle of the table. Let the Alpha King have his freedom. I slipped out of the room, avoiding the main corridor. The royal guards were stationed at the front elevators, arrogant and complacent, assuming the fragile Omega was still unconscious. I took the service stairwell, my heart pounding against my ribs. When I burst through the heavy metal doors into the cool, damp alley behind the hospital, a sleek, unmarked black Audi was already waiting, engine idling. The back door pushed open, and Sebastian, sharp-jawed, wearing a perfectly tailored suit, gave me a grim nod. "Get in," he said, tossing me a heavy duffel bag. "I've got the blockers and a new passport. We have a window of about 4 hours before the hospital staff does their evening rounds." I slid into the leather seat, pulling the door shut. As the car sped away, disappearing into the chaotic evening traffic of Manhattan, I looked back at the towering hospital. The original Oliver was dead. I was going to live. 3 months later. The misty, rugged coastline of Carmel by the Sea, California, was a world away from the suffocating glass and steel of New York. I had reinvented myself completely. Gone was Oliver Harrington, the tragic, jewel-draped Omega of the Crown. I was now Owen Miller, a quiet, unassuming beta who ran an upscale independent bookstore and rare manuscript consultancy. Thanks to Sebastian's meticulous planning and my offshore funds, I had purchased a small, cozy cottage overlooking the Pacific. I took heavy-duty scent blockers every morning, completely masking my sweet vanilla pheromones beneath the neutral, sterile scent of a beta. Life was peaceful. I spent my days evaluating first-edition novels for private collectors, and my evenings drinking decaf tea on my porch, listening to the waves. But my quiet escape came with a massive, undeniable complication. I placed a hand over my slightly rounded stomach, feeling a tiny, fluttery movement. A week after arriving in California, a wave of unbearable nausea had sent me to a discreet private clinic. Dr. Harrison, an older, tight-lipped beta physician who didn't ask questions, had delivered the news. I was pregnant. The Alpha King's heir was growing inside me. The irony was bitter. The original Oliver had spent 3 years desperate for a child to secure Nathaniel's affection. Now, I was carrying his baby while doing everything in my power to ensure Nathaniel never saw my face again. I had no intention of using this child as leverage. This was my baby now. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away in New York, the Alpha King was losing his mind. It hadn't happened immediately. The memories of Nathaniel that I occasionally saw on the national news broadcasts showed him stoic, powerful, and unfazed. According to the tabloids, the day after my escape, Nathaniel had walked into my hospital room, expecting to deliver the final, crushing blow. Instead, he found the signed divorce papers and an empty bed. Initially, the palace spun a narrative. They claimed I had fled out of guilt. Tristan had played the victim flawlessly, shedding tears for the cameras and leaning into Nathaniel's side. But the truth has a funny way of clawing its way to the surface. It started with a minor discrepancy. 2 months into my disappearance, Nathaniel's elite corporate security firm, Kroll Associates, was conducting a routine sweep of the Royal Penthouse's cybersecurity. One of the analysts, a fragmented piece of code in the home's smart hub system. Tristan had ordered a localized wipe of the security cameras in the hallway right before his fall. Nathaniel, known for his ruthless attention to detail, had personally overseen the data recovery using top-tier Palantir software. When the corrupted video file was finally restored and played in the dark, cavernous royal study, it shattered Nathaniel's entire reality. The silent, high-definition footage showed Tristan standing at the top of the stairs. Oliver was 10 feet away, hands in his pockets, looking exhausted. Tristan had smirked, grabbed the banister, and deliberately thrown himself backward down the marble steps, screaming as he fell. Oliver hadn't even touched him. The realization hit Nathaniel like a freight train. He had condemned his mate, stripped him of his dignity, and driven him away, all based on a malicious lie. The Alpha's dominant instincts, previously buried under layers of cold logic and corporate duty, violently snapped awake. His Omega, his legally bonded mate, was missing, unprotected, out in the world, believing he was hated. According to the encrypted updates Sebastian occasionally sent me, the fallout was apocalyptic. Nathaniel didn't just break up with Tristan, he annihilated him. Tristan was publicly exposed, stripped of his social standing, and slapped with federal charges for wire fraud, perjury, and corporate espionage, as Nathaniel's investigators dug up every dirty secret the Omega had ever buried. The White Lotus was thrown into a high-security holding facility awaiting trial, his reputation turned to ash. But destroying Tristan didn't bring me back. Nathaniel became a ghost, haunting his own empire. He fired half his security detail. He hired Pinkerton Consulting and 3 different underground intelligence syndicates to track me down. But Sebastian was good. My digital footprint was non-existent. I paid for everything in cash or through heavily layered corporate trusts. As my pregnancy progressed into the 4th month, my scent became harder to hide. The blockers were losing their efficacy against the overwhelming surge of Omega hormones designed to call out to an alpha. Dr. Harrison had warned me that the 3rd trimester would be dangerous without the alpha's pheromones to stabilize my system, but I refused to give in. I was at the bookstore on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, boxing up a rare 19th century manuscript for a client in London. The bell above the door chimed. I didn't look up immediately. "Welcome. Let me know if you're looking for anything specific," I called out, taping the box shut. Silence. A heavy, suffocating pressure suddenly filled the small shop. The air grew thick, the temperature seeming to drop by 10 degrees. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and my breath hitched. Beneath the smell of old paper and rain, a terrifyingly familiar scent pierced straight through my blockers. Winter pine and cold ozone. My heart stopped. I slowly raised my head. Standing in the doorway of my shop, dripping wet from the California rain, was Nathaniel. He looked nothing like the immaculate, untouchable king of Wall Street, I remembered. He had lost weight. His jaw was covered in dark stubble, his eyes bloodshot and rimmed with dark circles. He looked like a man who had walked through hell, his piercing gaze locked onto me, tracking over my face, before slowly, agonizingly, dropping to the undeniable soft curve of my stomach, hidden beneath my oversized knit sweater. A primal, rumbling growl vibrated in his chest, shaking the very floorboards of the shop. "I found you," he whispered, his voice cracking with a mixture of desperate relief and absolute possessiveness. I took a slow step backward, my hand gripping the heavy tape dispenser on the counter. The hunt was over, but the war was just beginning. The silence in the bookstore was deafening, broken only by the steady, relentless drumming of the California rain against the large front window. Nathaniel took a hesitant step forward, his expensive Italian leather shoes leaving wet, dark footprints on the polished oak floorboards. The winter pine scent rolling off him was suffocating, laced with a sharp, bitter edge of absolute desperation and lingering grief. "Get out!" I commanded, my voice cold and steady, despite the way my pulse hammered erratically against my ribs. I tightened my grip on the heavy tape dispenser. "You have exactly 5 seconds to leave my shop before I trigger the silent alarm and have the local police drag you out for trespassing." Nathaniel didn't flinch. He didn't erupt into the domineering rage I remembered from the original Oliver's memories. Instead, the Alpha King, the man who commanded global markets with a flick of his wrist, slowly sank to his knees right there in the middle of the aisle. The sheer submission of the gesture sent a shock wave through my system. Alphas of his pedigree did not kneel. "I saw the security footage," Nathaniel rasped, his voice raw and broken, as if he hadn't spoken above a whisper in months. He looked up at me, his icy blue eyes shattered. "I saw what Tristan did. I saw you standing there, entirely innocent. God, Oliver, I saw everything. I have spent the last 90 days tearing the world apart looking for you. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I destroyed us. But please, please don't run from me again." I stared down at him, feeling absolutely nothing but a hollow sense of vindication. The original Oliver might have wept, throwing himself into his mate's arms at this long-awaited confession. But I was not him. "You didn't destroy us, Nathaniel, because there never was an us," I replied, my tone perfectly even. "There was you, there was your little pet Tristan, and there was the convenient Omega you used as a political prop." I left the signed divorce papers on the nightstand. My lawyers filed them offshore. Legally, we are nothing to each other. Nathaniel's gaze dropped to the swell of my stomach. His hands twitched at his sides, fighting the primal, hard-wired instinct to step forward and shield his pregnant mate. "You are carrying my air," he whispered, a possessive rumble vibrating in his chest. "I can smell the changes in your chemistry. You are in your 2nd trimester. The blockers won't work much longer, Oliver. Your body will go into shock without my pheromones to stabilize the pregnancy. You know this. I was right, and I hated it. Dr. Harrison had warned me just yesterday that my blood pressure was spiking dangerously because my Omega biology was desperately craving the alpha who sired the child. "I will manage," I snapped, taking another step back. "I have money. I have a doctor. I don't need you." "I am not leaving without you," Nathaniel stated, the commanding edge of the Alpha King finally bleeding through his despair. "You can hate me. You can despise me. You can lock me out of your bedroom and never speak a word to me again. But I am bringing you back to New York, and I am going to keep you and our child safe. The jet is waiting at the Monterey tarmac. I brought a full medical team. I am not going anywhere with you, I shouted, the sudden spike of adrenaline proving to be a catastrophic mistake. A sharp, agonizing cramp ripped through my lower abdomen, doubling me over. The tape dispenser clattered to the floor. I gasped, clutching my stomach as a wave of dizzying darkness washed over my vision. My legs gave out. I didn't hit the floor. In a blur of motion, Nathaniel was there, catching me in his strong arms. The moment his skin made contact with mine, a flood of thick, soothing winter pine pheromones wrapped around me, instantly neutralizing the agonizing cramp. My treacherous Omega biology practically purred in relief, soaking up the alpha's presence like a dying man drinking water. I've got you, Nathaniel murmured frantically, scooping me up against his broad chest. I've got you, Oliver. You're safe. I was too weak to fight him, the physical relief so profound that my eyelids fluttered shut. As he carried me out of the shop and into a waiting armored SUV, I realized the bitter truth. I had escaped the Alpha King, but I couldn't escape my own biology. When I woke up, the rhythmic hum of jet engines vibrated beneath me. I was lying in a plush, velvet-lined bed inside a private Boeing 747. An IV was taped to my hand, dripping a clear saline and nutrient solution into my veins. Sitting in a leather chair beside the bed, watching me with unwavering, obsessive intensity, was Nathaniel. Your doctor in Carmel was a fool, Nathaniel said softly when he saw my eyes open. Your hormone levels were critically destabilized. Another week without an alpha's scent, and you would have gone into premature labor. I pulled the velvet blanket up to my chin, glaring at him. So what now? Am I a prisoner? You are my husband, Nathaniel corrected gently, though the underlying steel in his voice was unmistakable. The offshore divorce papers were intercepted and invalidated by my legal team. You are still legally bound to me. But things are going to change, Oliver. I am going to spend the rest of my life making up for what I did to you. Words are cheap, Nathaniel, I replied coldly, turning my head to look out the window at the dark, starlit sky. You want to keep me? Fine. But I am not returning to that penthouse. I am not playing the submissive little Omega for your social circles. And if you ever raise your voice at me, or touch me without my permission, I will vanish again, and next time I won't leave a trail for your security dogs to find. Nathaniel leaned forward, his expression fiercely determined. Whatever you want, name your terms. My empire, my assets, my life. They are all yours. Returning to New York was like stepping onto a battlefield. But this time, I was wearing the armor. I refused to return to the plaza. Instead, Nathaniel purchased a sprawling, ultra-secure townhouse on the Upper East Side, placing the deed solely in my name. I was surrounded by a phalanx of private security, and Sebastian, whom I had immediately reinstated as my personal counsel, was given a permanent office on the first floor. Nathaniel was a man possessed by guilt and a desperate need to prove his devotion. He stripped the royal household of anyone who had ever shown me disrespect, firing dozens of staff members. He spent his evenings sitting outside my bedroom door, releasing steady streams of calming pheromones to ease my pregnancy symptoms, never once demanding entry. But a kingdom built on cutthroat corporate warfare does not remain peaceful for long. Tristan was rotting in federal prison, but his downfall had left a power vacuum in the socio-political sphere. Enter Preston Sinclair, a ruthless alpha and the CEO of a rival multinational conglomerate. Preston saw Nathaniel's sudden, obsessive focus on his Omega as a fatal weakness. Rumors began to swirl that the Alpha King was losing his edge, distracted by his pregnant mate. 5 months into my return, when I was heavily pregnant and just weeks away from my due date, Preston made his move. I was sitting in the sunroom, reviewing some independent investment portfolios I had started building when Sebastian burst through the doors, his face pale. "We have a massive problem," Sebastian said, locking the heavy mahogany doors behind him. Preston Sinclair just launched a hostile takeover of the Crown's subsidiary tech divisions. But that's not the worst part. He managed to bribe 3 of Nathaniel's board members. They've called an emergency vote of no confidence to strip Nathaniel of his CEO title. If it passes, Sinclair absorbs the empire. "Where is Nathaniel?" I demanded, sitting up straight, my mind immediately shifting into the analytical gear of my past life. "He's trapped in a lockdown at the Wall Street headquarters. Sinclair orchestrated a fake security breach to lock Nathaniel in the subterranean server levels, so he can't make the board meeting in time to defend his seat. The vote is happening in 1 hour at the Sinclair Tower. Without Nathaniel there to cast his controlling shares, he loses everything." The original Oliver would have panicked. He would have cried, waiting for his alpha to save the day. But I was not him. I realized in that moment that this was my empire too. Nathaniel had promised me everything, and I was not about to let some arrogant rival alpha steal my child's inheritance. "Sebastian, get my coat," I ordered, standing up and ignoring the heavy ache in my lower back. "And call my security detail. We are going to Sinclair Tower." "Oliver, you are 8.5 months pregnant. You can't walk into a room full of hostile alphas," Sebastian protested, though he was already grabbing my cashmere trench coat. "Watch me," I growled. The arrival of the Alpha King's Omega at the Sinclair Tower boardroom was like a bomb going off. I pushed through the heavy oak doors, flanked by 4 massive security contractors. The boardroom was packed with elite executives. At the head of the table sat Preston Sinclair, a smug, oily alpha who reeked of arrogant cedarwood. "Mr. Harrington," Preston sneered, though his eyes widened at the sight of my massive belly. "This is a restricted corporate meeting. I'm afraid your husband has been detained. You have no business being here. Go home and rest." I didn't blink. I walked slowly to the opposite end of the long mahogany table, the room completely silent, except for the heavy thud of my boots. I slammed a leather binder down onto the glass surface. "Actually, Preston, I have every right to be here," I said, my voice projecting with chilling authority. 3 months ago, Nathaniel legally transferred exactly 50% of his controlling voting shares into a private holding company. A holding company that I am the sole proprietor of. A ripple of shock went through the room. Preston's smug smile faltered. "That's impossible. I assure you, it is fully documented and legally binding," I replied, staring him down, completely unaffected by his aggressive alpha pheromones. "Furthermore, I've spent the last few weeks reviewing your recent acquisitions, Preston. Did you really think you could mask the severe liquidity crisis in your European branches by shuffling the debt through offshore shell companies? The SEC would be very interested in the fraudulent tax documents you filed last quarter." Preston stood up, slamming his hands on the table, his eyes flashing red with alpha fury. "You insignificant little—" "I am voting no on the motion of no confidence," I interrupted loudly, my voice cutting through his growl like a blade. "And as the representative of the majority shareholder, the motion is denied. In addition, I am formally initiating a countersuit against Sinclair conglomerates for corporate sabotage. I will bleed your company dry in litigation before you can even attempt another buyout." The board members, realizing Preston's ship was sinking, immediately began murmuring, pulling away from the rival Alpha. I had outmaneuvered him flawlessly using nothing but financial strategy. Suddenly, the heavy boardroom doors blew open, shattering the tension. Nathaniel stood in the doorway, breathing heavily, his suit jacket discarded and his tie ripped open. He looked furious, a feral, terrifying alpha ready to tear the room apart to get to me. But as he surveyed the scene, Preston pale and defeated, the board members terrified, and me standing at the head of the table with absolute, unbothered poise. His rage melted into profound, absolute awe. He walked slowly toward me, ignoring everyone else in the room. He stopped in front of me, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and sheer reverence. "You handled them," Nathaniel whispered, looking from the stunned executives back to my face. "I protected what belongs to me," I replied, lifting my chin. "You were sloppy, Nathaniel. Don't let it happen again." A brilliant, breathtaking smile broke across Nathaniel's face, entirely wiping away the ruthless king and leaving only a deeply devoted mate. He didn't care about the board. He didn't care about Preston. He dropped to his knees right in front of the entire executive committee, pressing his face to the curve of my stomach, wrapping his arms around my waist in a public display of absolute submission. "My brilliant, beautiful king," he murmured against my sweater, his voice vibrating with pride. 2 weeks later, as the private royal wing of Mount Sinai, I gave birth to a healthy, screaming baby boy named Leo. Nathaniel never left my side, holding my hand and weeping openly when the nurses placed our son on my chest. Our dynamic had fundamentally changed. I was no longer the despised, pathetic Omega, trailing after an indifferent Alpha. I was his equal, his partner, and the razor-sharp mind that guarded our empire. Nathaniel never took a single meeting without my input, and the public quickly learned to fear the Omega just as much as the Alpha. Tristan was forgotten, Preston was bankrupted, and I had successfully rewritten my own destiny. I didn't just survive the Alpha King, I conquered him. That concludes the dramatic saga of Oliver and Nathaniel. From a discarded, heartbroken Omega to a powerful, calculating equal who brought a ruthless Alpha King to his knees, this journey proves that the ultimate revenge is reinvention and reclaiming your own power. If you enjoyed this intense Omegaverse tale of betrayal, redemption, and absolute corporate dominance, please hit that like button, share this video with your fellow drama lovers, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling stories right now.